This is a terrific turnout for the first thing on a Monday morning. Thank you so much all for getting here through the traffic and early in your schedules. My name is Doug Paul. I'm Vice President for Studies here at the Carnegie Endowment, and it's my personal and our institutional great pleasure to welcome this morning His Excellency Hassan Wirajuda, Foreign Minister of the great government of Indonesia. With the world's largest Muslim population and a vibrant civil society, Indonesia demonstrates that democracy, a multi-ethnic population, a wealth of resources, and a drive for development can not only coexist but also thrive. The United States and Indonesia have pledged to develop a comprehensive partnership that advances common interests on a broad range of regional and global issues, from environmental protection and climate change to trade and investment, from democracy promotion to health and education, from regional and global security issues to effective counterterrorism. During her first trip abroad, Secretary Clinton said that building a comprehensive partnership with Indonesia is a critical step on behalf of the United States' commitment to smart power, to using all the tools at its disposal to advance its goals, including the progression of democracy and development, as well as addressing global threats such as climate change and nuclear proliferation. Given the impressive range of issues Indonesia and the United States can and should work together on, we're honored to have Minister Wirajuda with us today to talk about the comprehensive partnership and what kinds of concrete cooperation we might expect in the future. Minister Wirajuda has served as Indonesia's foreign minister already now since 2001, and Carnegie is delighted to welcome him here today. I'm about to introduce Ambassador David Merrill, who serves as President of the United States Indonesia Society, to introduce the Foreign Minister. Ambassador Merrill was USAID's Mission Director in Indonesia for 4 years and has gotten to know the country well, where he managed a wide range of programs, including financial sector development, democracy, civil society, population, environment, and education. And after his introduction, I really look forward to the question and answer period, because we've got in this audience people who are going to ask some really good questions. This is a very knowledgeable audience we're lucky to have attracted here today. So, David, please.
Thank you very much, Doug. Yusindo and the Carnegie Endowment are delighted and honored to welcome Indonesian Foreign Minister Dr. Hassan Wirajuda today. I also thank Freeport for its generous support for this event. Dr. Wirajuda was appointed Foreign Minister by Indonesian President Yudhoyono in 2004, and as Doug mentioned, was also Foreign Minister in the government of President Megawati Sukarnoputri previously. His appointment by 2 different presidents and 2 different administrations shows the high regard in which he is held as a professional and a statesman. A lawyer by training, a diplomat by choice, he is definitely a good choice for all of us. He has deftly charted a more robust course for Indonesian foreign policy, projecting a more outward role for Indonesia in regional and global affairs, a role reflecting Indonesia's population size, economic growth, and its flourishing democracy. It's remarkable when you think that Indonesia, which emerged only 10 years ago from 3 decades of authoritarian rule, has emerged as Southeast Asia's leading example of a vibrant democracy. Under the minister's leadership, it has even created a forum for countries in the region to share their best practices about democracy, tolerance, and pluralism. The Bali Democracy Forum, which first met last December, was the first time Asian countries met to talk in depth about democracy, previously and still a sensitive subject in the region, and this was due to Dr. Wirajuda's vision. Our speaker is also an accomplished peace negotiator, appropriate for our venue today. He was chief Indonesian negotiator with the Free Aceh movement, leading to the 2005 peace agreement. Earlier, facilitator of the peace process between the government of the Philippines and the Moro National Liberation Front, MNLF. Dr. Wirajuda has been extensively educated in many countries, but particularly in the United States. He earned his Doctor of Juridical Science in International Law from the University of Virginia School of Law, his Master of Law from Harvard Law, his Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, another excellent choice. Not surprisingly, he is a strong proponent of strengthening educational and academic exchanges between Indonesia and the United States, as are we. But we're most especially pleased that the minister's visit to Washington today is to advance the comprehensive bilateral partnership between Indonesia and the United States, the first such partnership in the 60-year history of U.S.-Indonesian relations. Indonesian President Yudhoyono proposed the bilateral partnership at his Yusindo speech last November. In response, Secretary of State Clinton committed the United States to working with Indonesia to pursue such a partnership with a concrete agenda. It has been on a fast track ever since. The Minister and Secretary Clinton discussed the partnership during the Secretary's visit to Indonesia and made improvements and enhancements of it, and they will be meeting again today, this afternoon, to advance the partnership. To generate public input and recommendations for the partnership, USINDO convened a major conference here in Washington in April. Our report on the findings and recommendations for the partnership was issued today and is available here. If you don't have it, it's just outside the door. We look forward to hearing Minister Wirajuda's views on U.S.-Indonesia relations, the comprehensive bilateral partnership, Indonesia's foreign policy, and international peace. Ladies and gentlemen, to the distinguished Indonesian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Hassan Wirajuda.
Mr. Doug Paul, Vice President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Ambassador David Merrill of USINDO, distinguished guests, my friends, I thank all of you for the honor and privilege of being here with you today. It is a pleasure to be among friends of Indonesia and among personal friends, old and new. As I stand before you today, the echoes of a great speech, one of the greatest speeches I have ever heard from a world leader, are still ringing in my ears and in the ears of all humankind. For President Barack Obama in Cairo a few days ago invited the peoples of the Muslim world to partnerships with the American people to address an array of critical issues: violent extremisms, the Middle East situations, nuclear disarmament, democracy, religious freedoms, women's rights, and economic development and opportunity. In doing so, he called on all humankind to form one family with all its members at peace with one another, having faith in one another and working together to shape a better world. I came here to tell you that Indonesia, the country with the world's largest Muslim populations, has long prepared itself to answer President Obama's call for partnerships. His message and call are actually ours. Soon after this breakfast forum, I will be meeting with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to continue a dialogue that we began in Jakarta when she graciously visited us early last February at a time when the Obama's administration was but a few weeks old. During that momentous visit, we started talks on comprehensive partnerships between the United States and Indonesia, a partnership that not coincidentally also covers precisely the issues that President Obama addressed in Cairo. We in Indonesia are heartened, actually exhilarated by this new paradigm in American foreign policy. At the core of this policy are issues that Indonesia has long stood for. And we are delighted by its inclusive approach, one that strives for outreach and is willing to listen instead of simply telling other nations what to do. We are certainly glad that finally the United States has re-embraced multilateralism. We are encouraged by President Obama's commitment to democracy, for we love being regarded as the world's third largest democracy after India and the United States. We like to call our election feast of democracy. Last April, we held parliamentary elections that were very peaceful, free, and democratic. Early this coming July, we will be holding direct presidential elections for only the second time in our history. The election has involved 170 million voters, 625,000 polling stations, 38 national political parties, 6 local parties, and 3 sets of presidential and vice presidential candidates. Since 2005, we have held some 500 direct local elections to elect governors, vice governors, district heads, and mayors, moving the World Bank to call Indonesia the election capital of the world. But of course, in terms of logistics, to organize a national election in Indonesia is a nightmare. But we would like now to look at our democracy not only in terms of its size, but in terms of its quality. Indeed, as President Obama said, which I fully share, democracy is not only about having successful elections, as elections alone do not make true democracy. We would like our partners to see how we are fine-tuning our political institutions and the checks and balances that ensure that government rules with the consent of the governed, how we are reforming our military establishments and our justice system to ensure promotion and protections of human rights, and how we practice the democratic process we call musyawarah and mufakat, consultations and dialogue toward consensus from the national to the grassroots level. This habit of dialogue is deeply embedded in our culture because that is the only way we can keep our national unity in the face of the immense diversity of Indonesia's ethnic groupings, culture, languages, and religions. Because of our commitment to dialogue and to the redress of legitimate grievances, we achieved peace in our province of Aceh in 2005 after almost 3 decades of a successionist rebellions. Peace in Aceh enabled us, with the help of the international community, to rebuild and rehabilitate its entire coastal area that was devastated by the tsunami of December 2005. It was a success story from the initial plan of rehabilitation and reconstruction of Aceh of 5 years. Last April, we closed the office of the Aceh Reconstruction Agency simply because, 1 year ahead than the initial plan, simply because we have been very successful in the overall rehabilitation and reconstruction of Aceh. In the same manner, we brought to a peaceful end the conflicts between Muslims and Christians in Maluku, eastern Indonesia. And we are not laying separatist sentiments in Papua. But like in the case of Aceh, we strongly believe that it is through dialogue and negotiation we'll be able to solve whatever problems we have in Indonesia. Democracy has blessed us with peace and order. It has also restored our economic dynamisms. 10 years ago, we were down and almost out. We bore the brunt of the Asian crisis of 1998 as we suffered a negative growth of 13.5% and widespread political turmoil. The only way we could save ourselves from the total economic and political collapse was to launch an era of reformasi, during which we made our transitions from an authoritarian rule to a more fully democratic system. Today, our military is out of politics and out of business. It is focused on national defense. Our government structure is now highly decentralized, with the local governments in control of the funds they need for development. We call it wide-ranging autonomy, but I think in practice we are pretty close to a federal system. Perhaps not in the title, but more in substance. We also wage a relentless battle against corruption that brought to justice more than 100 high-profile public and corporate officials. We reform our banking and financial institutions and adopted prudent fiscal and monetary policies. We were thus able to bring down our debt to GDP ratio from 85% in 2000 to 32% last year. Meanwhile, we achieved food self-sufficiency. You know, to feed 230 million people, it's not an easy job. This year, we have 3 million tons of rice surplus that we intend to export and add to the world food supply. So Indonesia wishes to be part of the solution of the current global food crisis. With food security, we are assured of social and political stability at a time of global economic crisis. We are looking forward to a GDP growth of 4.5% this year. We are therefore one of a few ASEAN countries, including notably China and India, that will show positive economic growth in the midst of the global economic crisis. Everything that we have today, our democracy, our unity and political stability, our economic resilience in the face of a global economic and financial crisis, is the fruit of reform. This is not to say that our democracy is perfect or that we have no severe economic problems. We must keep on consolidating our political and judicial reform. We must attend to the needs of 16.1% of our populations who lives below the poverty line. Since 2005, as we lifted an oil subsidy, we have been giving direct subsidy to some 19.1 million impoverished Indonesians in the form of cash handouts, rice distributions, free education for their children, and public health. We learned that the social safety net is a source of economic resilience, leading to social and political stability. But the keys to our economic progress are robust export, strong domestic consumptions, and foreign direct investment. Our growth is now consumer-driven, as there are huge Indonesian consumers, all 230 million of them. And our experience shows that domestic consumption plays an important role when exports decline due to the global economic crisis. Recently, the Nielsen company rated Indonesia as the country with the most confident consumers, with a positive 104 points. In the months ahead, most of their purchases will be technology products, and that gives us confidence that our stimulus package of around $6.3 billion will work. The progress that we achieved in the past 10 years of reform has enabled us to reach out and play a proactive role on the regional and global stage. In Southeast Asia, we in Indonesia espouse the political development of associations of Southeast Asian nations, ASEAN, after spending so much of the past 40 years focused on economic cooperations to the neglect of its political development. ASEAN already has a free trade area and very recently a blueprint toward an ASEAN economic community. By 2015, there will be a free flow of goods, capital, and labor within ASEAN as it becomes a single market and a single production base. Indonesia, however, has deemed it just important that ASEAN should also develop politically. We therefore work hard to ensure that the new ASEAN Charter, which came into force last December, requires of all ASEAN members a firm commitment to democracy and to the promotions and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The ASEAN Charter is a treaty, and its stipulations are legally binding. What makes ASEAN unique is its inclusiveness. Like Indonesia, which makes up some 40% of its aggregate populations of more than 500 million, ASEAN is a bridge builder. At the height of the Asian crisis of 1998, ASEAN built a bridge of cooperation with its economically mature Northeast Asian neighbors, China, Japan, and South Korea. We call it ASEAN Plus 3. This was the start of the ASEAN Plus 3 process, which effectively addressed the Asian crisis with a system of currency swap called the Chiang Mai Initiatives. Now it is called the Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateral. And Indonesia benefits from this Chiang Mai Initiative, as a few months ago we secured a bilateral swap agreements, namely with Japan of some 12.5 billion and with China of 14 billion US dollar, and in total we have a financial backup of our currency of some 26 billion US dollar, meaning half of the total of Indonesian's foreign currency reserve. And this certainly sends a strong message to the market, and for that matter has improved the currency, our currency, rupiah, to a position even better before than the crisis. Since then, we have seen the possibility of East Asia developing into an East Asia community. This idea is being evolved today in the form of the East Asia Summit, EAS. To us in Indonesia, East Asia is more than just a geographical area comprising of what traditionally are the Southeast and Northeast Asia. It is a groupings of nations that have formed a habit of consultations and cooperations over the years. That is why the East Asia Summit includes Australia, New Zealand, and India. In our considered view, their inclusions make East Asia much more balanced grouping, where no single power can be too dominant. There is no clear-cut architecture for East Asia at this stage, but ASEAN is promoting free trade areas with almost all of its dialogue partners, an effort that can lead to the setting up of an East Asia-wide free trade area. Perhaps I can predict by 2012 we'll have in place an East Asia-wide that will put together a single market of 3.5 billion people of dynamic economies of countries of its members. Indonesia has been involved in a bridge building in all directions between Asia and Africa, as we initiated the Asia-African Summit in 2005 in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the Asian African Conference of 1955, held in Bandung, Indonesia. And since then, we are promoting new Asia-African strategic partnerships. Between ASEAN and the Pacific Islands, we have established a forum of dialogues of countries in Southwest Pacific, in addition to triangular dialogue involving Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and Australia. But also Indonesia has been playing an active role in the process of dialogue between Asia and Europe, ASEM. To my mind, the ultimate bridge building will be that one between the West and the Muslim world. And in this great endeavor, we in Indonesia, the country with the largest Muslim populations, intend to partner with the United States. While the overwhelming majority of Indonesians are Muslims, moderate Muslims, all the world's greatest religions, cultures, and civilizations have found a home in our country. President Obama, who grew up in Indonesia, bears witness to the fact that devout Christians worship freely there and are accepted as equal participants in community affairs. The Eastern, Islamic, and Western civilizations have been living together in harmony in Indonesia for many centuries. There have been advocates of Indonesia adopting Islam as the state religion, but their advocacy has never gained popular support. The fact is that 7 Muslim-oriented political parties gain a respectable 24% of the vote, which is a decline as compared to 2004 elections, but only because they did not advance an Islamic agenda, rather Islamist agenda, and instead ran on a national platform, including good governance. To win votes, both nationalist and Islamic-oriented political parties have had to gravitate toward the ideological center. This has made Islam in Indonesia even more moderate. It has also taken the wind from the sails of the militants, especially the terrorists. We did suffer a series of terrorist attacks a few years ago, notably the bombing that killed more than 200 innocent individuals, mostly tourists, in Bali in October 2002. Since then, however, we have brought most of the perpetrators to justice, broke up their networks, and put them on the run without a single complaint of human rights violations. But we have persuaded a good number of terrorists and their sympathizers to come over to the side of the law by convincing them that there are peaceful ways of redressing their grievances and meeting their needs in life. We were able to do this by going out our way to show them that in spite of their errors, we care for them as human beings. The most effective way to fight terrorism, then, is to strike a happy balance between ensuring the security of society and respect for the democratic process, rule of law, and human rights of individuals. And at the same time, we must empower the moderates in our society by promoting dialogue among the faiths, cultures, and civilizations, in which the moderates have sufficiently strong voice to neutralize the militants' rhetoric of hate and despair. We believe so strongly in this kind of inclusive dialogue that since 2004, we have been organizing and taking part in interfaith, intercultural, and inter-civilizational dialogues at the regional, interregional, and global level, in addition to bilateral dialogue mechanisms that we created with many countries, aside from making use of bilateral mechanisms for that purpose. As a matter of fact, we believe that many of the security problems of the world have remained intractable for lack of dialogue. The Middle East peace process has broke down because the main parties who should be talking intensively with each other are not on speaking terms. We therefore support every initiative of President Obama to restart dialogue in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Arab nations, and between the Palestinian factions. We add our voice to his call for a stop to the building of more illegal Israeli settlements. We hold that the two-state solution is a valid dream, and will continue to do our part to help the Palestinians build their capacity to govern themselves. For your information, 2 years ago we hosted an Asia-African conference on capacity building for Palestine, and since then we organized a series of programs, workshops, trainings for Palestinians in different areas. We encourage every effort of President Obama at dialogue to salvage the disarmament agenda from oblivion. Since the demise of the Cold War, there has not been much progress in the reductions of nuclear weapons, let alone their eradications. The credibility of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and NPT regime has been eroded. The NPT review conferences since 2000 were fruitless. Meanwhile, proliferation goes unchecked. Some countries are developing nuclear weapons and conducting nuclear tests. There is a line of proliferation starting from Israel in the very west of Asia, reaching to the very east, North Korea. And there is a need to make the NPT regime truly universal, both in terms of participating countries and substantive coverage. Exclusive groups of owners of nuclear technology are still operating outside the purview of the NPT. We supported the indefinite extension of the NPT in 1995 with an understanding that state parties will work to strengthen the review process with a view to ending nuclear tests, to keeping the reductions of their nuclear stockpiles, and to support the implementation of nuclear weapon-free zones. Naturally, we were dismayed when the nuclear weapon states were not forthcoming on the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, and on the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone Treaty, which have been in existence for by now around 18 years. The threat of a nuclear holocaust has become more deadly simply because for a long time it was forgotten until President Obama came on the scenes. We welcome, therefore, and support his policy to revive bilateral negotiations with Russia on the reductions on the number of nuclear warheads, and also his forthcoming policy on disarmaments and non-proliferations. We share his visions of a world in which nuclear weapons have been eradicated. We trust that he will succeed in getting the CTBT ratified, and we promise that when that happens, Indonesia will immediately follow suit. We uphold the right of every nation to peaceful uses of nuclear technology for development, but we oppose, as faithful member of the NPT, any diversions of such technology to military purposes. That's what I said when I visited Iran some years ago. We stand ready to work closely with the United States in seeking and promoting dialogue with North Korea and Iran, leading to denuclearization of North Korea and to find solutions of the Iranian nuclear issue. Apart from disarmaments and the other issues I have just cited, there is a wide array of challenges that the United States and Indonesia must address together if our partnership is to be truly comprehensive. We are both members of the G20, and therefore within that framework we can continue in our own respective ways to the solutions of the global economic and financial crisis. On a purely bilateral basis, we can coordinate policies and initiatives to address the food security crisis and the energy security crisis, both of which are global. And we can advance the Bali roadmap toward the fruitful negotiations on a new climate change regime in Copenhagen this coming December, one that is based on the principles of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capability. In this regard, we are grateful for the support that the United States, through Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, extended to the successful efforts of Indonesia during the recent World Ocean Conference to mainstream the oceans and coastal issues into the global dialogue on climate change. Indonesia has also embarked on an initiative to promote democracy, not only in Southeast Asia, but also in the larger Asian regions. Last December, in conjunction with the anniversary of the Universal Declarations of Human Rights, we launched the Bali Democracy Forum, an inclusive Asia-wide intergovernmental dialogue on democracy and political development. This is a high-level forum for exchange of experience and best practices, and not to compare any model of democracy, I should have said, and not to impose any model of democracy to others. I think this is a very strategic process, because for the first time that we're able to bring the issue of promotion of democracy on the agenda of intergovernmental forum in Asia. As it follows that in our Asian regions, we are pretty shy to talk about democracy and promotion of human rights. But I strongly believe that as we have been successful in our efforts since 2003 to help convince ASEAN, you can imagine, among 10 members of ASEAN, we are comprising of countries of democracy, half democracy, and on the other extreme, even military junta. And to Indonesia, we thought this is not the best way to proceed. That's why in 2002 and 2003, we came up with an idea of promoting political development in ASEAN, meaning to make ASEAN democracy, as well as respect human rights and for good governance. And now the agenda is very well placed in the new ASEAN Charter. Of course, when you recall the situation of Myanmar, I would say that by adopting new ASEAN Charter, by the new ASEAN Charter enter into force, we cannot expect that overnight all ASEAN countries would become democratic. But it is a process that we have begun, and that's why, in our view, the situations in Asia, in a way, also a reflection of what we do have in the smaller Southeast Asian regions. That's why the Bali Democracy Forum. We thought that our fellow democracies would be in a position to help not only the Bali Democracy Forum sustainable, but also a success. There will have to be a strong socio-economic component of our partnerships, Indonesia-US partnerships. That is because for democracy to be credible in the long run, it must deliver on its promise of socio-economic development. In the words of Secretary Hillary Clinton, promotion of democracy and prosperity must go hand in hand. In this regard, in the eyes of some developing world are on Indonesia to see if democracy we embrace will redound to the welfare of our people. This is a question of credibility of our voice. For that matter, we determined to really makes democracy works in Indonesia. Democracy works for the better welfare of our people, because others would, in the region, would easily dismiss. To talk about democracy, look at Indonesia, where people are hungry, people are poor. It is in this context that we see the important partnerships between Indonesia and the United States in the context of socio-economic developments. Ladies and gentlemen, there is so much that the United States and Indonesia can do together, not only for each other, but for humankind and in the causes that we believe in. The ultimate cause, of course, in the shaping of a better world that every human being, no matter what faith he professes, no matter the color of his skin, can live a better life and secure a better future for his children. That cause is written in the American Constitution as the right to, and I quote, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. It's also written in the preamble of Indonesia's 1945 constitutions as the mandate to contribute to a world order based on independence, abiding peace, and social justice. The ultimate truth is that it is written in every human heart that we are all our brothers' keepers. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Wirajuda, for really an extraordinarily comprehensive and insightful presentation of Indonesia's domestic and foreign policy agenda. Indonesia is a country of tremendous variety of smells and tastes, and you've given us a broad taste of your domestic, regional, and global agenda, and I really appreciate that this morning. I'd also call everyone's attention to the fact that he's made a commitment on behalf of the Indonesian government on the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, which has been something quite substantially contributing to the confidence that we can have that if we're able to ourselves move forward on this, there will be a global response that will bring this treaty into force. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to turn you, Mr. Minister, over to the tender mercies of our audience of friends here who seem to, I think, represent a substantial body of Washington long-term Indonesian and Southeast Asian watching. So this is, shall I point out the questioners for you, or would you like to do that and pick? All right, We're open for questions till about 10:15. We'll go start up right here. Yeah, please. Sure. Identify yourself, please, and ask a question.
My name is Marie Hebert. I work on Asia at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but I want to ask you a political question. You alluded to Burma and the ASEAN Charter. Can you talk a little bit more about what ASEAN is doing in light of the current trial of Aung San Suu Kyi and the upcoming elections next year? And secondly, if Secretary Clinton asks you this afternoon what you would like the U.S. to do, where you would like the U.S. to come out in its policy review, what recommendations would you have for her? Thank you.
Like you and many countries in the developed world, we in ASEAN are actually frustrated in dealing with the Myanmar issue of lack of democracy and human rights. Actually, within ASEAN meetings, both at the leaders and in particular at the foreign ministers level, we have been discussing the issue of Myanmar in a very open and frank manner. That's, I think, the most polite words they can use on Myanmar. And in the context of the existing process that brought the Aung San Suu Kyi to trial, we in ASEAN has issued a statement reminding Myanmar of the previous calls by our leaders to release Aung San Suu Kyi as soon as possible. And we repeated that call at the ASEAN Europe meetings and ASEAN EU Foreign Ministers meeting when we met last week in Hanoi and Phnom Penh. Indonesia tend to view the problem of Myanmar. It's not only the problem of a lack of democracy and human rights. We wish to see the problem of Myanmar in all its dimensions. And we wish to see that the international community address the problem of Myanmar in all of its dimensions. First, the real concerns of Myanmar on the questions of its territorial integrity and national unity. It's not potential, it is real, because Myanmar is facing, throughout their independent years, in facing various local rebellions from different ethnic groups. They try to solve the problem through dialogue, but they haven't yet fully settled this problem and separatist problems. And what the maximum they have reached so far is a kind of ceasefire. But still, the rebel groups are holding their weapons and ammunitions. In other words, I think the international community has to be sensitive on this. After all, it is a question of principle, that all countries have to support the territorial integrity and national unity of independent states. And because to us, Myanmar has been quite open. So how can you expect us to move faster on democracy if, on the other hand, we are facing serious problem of our territorial integrity and national unity? Second, the dire economic and humanitarian situation in Myanmar. The sanctions imposed by Europeans and the United States indeed made the local people even suffer more. So I don't want to say that we have to use carrot and sticks, but at least in the area in which we can help Myanmar address, after all, we help the people of Myanmar to alleviate the sufferings. I think this would encourage Myanmar to be more open. I have mentioned earlier that one way to attack the problem of lack of democracy in Myanmar is to push for ASEAN to promote a political agenda, political development on its agenda. meaning to make ourselves democracy, to make ourselves respect human rights, and for good governance. I was myself struck when I visited Myanmar in January 2002. Indonesia was under a military-dominated government for 30 years, but never our military officers, when they occupy civilian jobs, they were full military uniform. But I found in Myanmar myself that they are proud to tell us that they are military junta, and they wear military uniform in their civilian office. That's why we took an initiative on promoting political agenda, political development in our ASEAN cooperations. Indonesia is of the view that the neighboring countries of Myanmar should engage Myanmar more closely. Indonesia initiated last year focus groups, initially involving Indonesia, China, India, and Myanmar. We all agreed. In fact, at one point in September last year, we agreed to have the first foreign ministers meeting of the focus group, only to our regret that suddenly India withdrew from that groups. But still, especially in New York, we continue in sponsoring this more closer engagement of neighboring countries of Myanmar, adding Vietnam and Japan in that process. The crucial point is that as Myanmar themselves has declared, made public, that they are going to have, in their own term, multi-party elections next year. It is important to ensure that they have a credible process. Credible means that all groups, including LND and Daw San Suu Kyi, must join the process. Of course, in the light of the current situations, we are following very closely, and as told the Foreign Minister of Myanmar at the recent ASEAN meeting, last week, that we will follow these events very closely, and we wish that Myanmar follow their commitments under ASEAN Charter, and we will see if Myanmar disassociate themselves, or in the end also we will make judgment on to what extent the participation, memberships of Myanmar in ASEAN as bring to the common good of us. On the process of within the U.S. To review its foreign policy, is that what I gather from you? It's not me to advise any foreign governments or friends how they would adopt a policy, major policy outlines. But certainly we in Indonesia have been very appreciative from the very first day of the Obama's administrations, their commitment to pursue dialogue, their commitment to engage others, including of those who are not always in the same positions of the United States. We welcome the commitment of the new Obama administration to engage Asia more. I think this is something that in a way has been reflected by the visit of Secretary Hillary Clinton to our regions last February. But we wish to see the United States engage us more. After all, when people said that The 21st century is the century of the Asia Pacific. We cannot see the U.S. that cannot be too closely involved with us. Keep in mind that we are in a dynamic process of developing a future East Asia community.
Thank you.
Sir, I'm Andre Savaggio. I'm director.
Wait for the microphone, please. People in the back can't hear you.
Sorry. I'm Andre Savaggio, and I'm just the director for U.S.-Vietnam relations and business development in Vietnam for a company based in Malaysia called Arab Investment Asia Kuwait Malaysia. And but we have interests in Indonesia as well as in Vietnam, even though I work Vietnam for them. So I was very interested in your comments about how Indonesia is providing the leadership towards the ASEAN Charter, and including, of course, all the members, including the most problematic being Myanmar. But having the complex sejarah or history between Indonesia and Vietnam from the days when there was real tension, when the PKI was still a threat internally in Indonesia, to the time after the liberation of, the unification of Vietnam, and the two countries grew very close together, as you know. For your predecessor, Foreign Minister Mokhtar, some time ago during the Suharto time, came into Hanoi and talked to the Vietnam Foreign Minister, Nguyen Cat Thich, and General Merdani came in, and the relation got quite good. Now moving way beyond that area, where Indonesia is a viable democracy, and how is the cooperation with Vietnam now? How much are they supporting your initiative in moving towards a charter that includes political reform as much as the economic reform? And by the way, it's wonderful to have a foreign minister who understands our president's policies so thoroughly.
There's been a very close affinity between Indonesia and Vietnam. You rightly mentioned of the historical backgrounds of how Indonesia and Vietnam struggle for our own independence. We are very much encouraged. In fact, we are proud by the rapid progress that Vietnam has been enjoying in terms of its economic development, its transformations from one-party rule to still one-party rule, but of different phase. Vietnam this year enjoys positive economic growth of some 3%. So I should have added what I said before, that only a very few countries in Asia that enjoy positive economic growth in the midst of the current global financial crisis. And for that matter, Vietnam is an important partner of Indonesia. And Indonesia and Vietnam are two independent-minded countries in the regions. I recall that when Indonesia was practically alone in championing a more inclusive East Asia Summit, because some of us preferred that East Asia Summit should only include 10 ASEAN countries plus China, Japan, and Korea. Singapore was more willing to the extent of inviting India in that process, but not ready to see Australia and New Zealand be in the East Asian process. At one point, former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew told me that I support your idea of more inclusive East Asia. And you know why? He said, because of the continent-based Southeast Asian countries, they would more or less automatically siding with China, with the exception of two independent-minded countries, Indonesia and Vietnam. And that's why, since then, the process towards the more inclusive East Asia, as we champion, gradually gain ground. And we were successful in the end to have the East Asia Summit process that is more inclusive, comprising of the current 16. Through our appreciation on the question of promoting democracy and greater respect for human rights in ASEAN, in particular on the issue of Myanmar, to our positive surprise, Vietnam has been more open, at least among us, and also stressed the call for Myanmar to change. And at one point gives Myanmar an example how Vietnam reconciles its history in dealing with the United States, and for that matter, expect Myanmar to change in a way, be more open to the international community. I was with the Foreign Minister of Vietnam last week, in not only in Hanoi but also then in Phnom Penh, during which I had bilateral meetings. Interestingly, when we talked again on Myanmar, he admitted to me that it is time for change, including in Vietnam. He admitted that Vietnam is having considerable problems in adjusting itself, but nonetheless, it is important that at that highest level, Vietnam express its commitment to a more gradual change toward democracy. This is something, for me, is quite a personal impressions, I would say.
Thank you, Minister. It's good to see you in Washington. And really, the democratic development in Indonesia is very impressive. I want to ask you a couple of questions in relation to that, and also one in relation to Burma, but I'll be very brief. On democratic development in Indonesia, you mentioned that the military is no longer in political power and so forth, which is true. But the reform in terms of the military has been the slowest in relation to other issues in Indonesia. I wonder if you can kindly address why reform in relation to the military has been relatively slow. And likewise, if you can address the issue of Papua. You've mentioned Aceh. I was wondering what progress has been made in terms of resolving the Papua issue. On Burma, I just want to ask you, you have ASEAN has experience of constructive engagement for over 2 decades. What lessons would you draw from that, and how best can that policy be improved upon? Thank you.
Mr. Minister, you can answer any one of those 3 questions.
Well, Dr. Mutia Lagapa is my classmate at Fletcher School. So we have quite a good Fletcher mafia in this room, I believe. So, as you said, I don't need to answer all questions that Dr. Mutia Lagapa posed to me. After all, he's an expert in this very area. On the military reform, Indonesia, please keep in mind that the military was the most powerful groups in Indonesia. And for that matter, it's to be understood that as a process, they need more time. But we must appreciate the fact that as military was represented in our parliaments until 2004, and in fact, according to the agreed plan at the national level, military would withdraw from their representation in our parliaments, I think by 2009. But in practice, the military decided by their own to withdraw their memberships in parliaments. And this is something that in ways quite contrary, on the contrary, shows the rapid rather than the slowest form of reform. But if it is said that reform is slow in the military, I think partly this is more of psychological. But in terms of substance, I know fully well that, for example, the peace talks on Aceh leading to the, we call it the peace agreements or an MOU on Aceh in August 2005 was possible because the military was really professional. The support of General Edriartono was crucial. And here I witnessed myself that the military has played itself their more or less proper role in the in the civilian governments. I think another problem is that while we have asked the military to not only reduce their not reduce to cease, in fact, their socio-political role and to cease their business activities. Regretfully, that the state, the government, is not in a position to compensate in terms of providing adequate budget for the military. We spend 20% as mandated by our constitution for education, spend of our national budget for education. But for the military, they continue to have only a very minuscule percentage of our national budget for military spending. Thanks perhaps through the regional cooperation, in particular the in ASEAN that we have enjoyed for continuously 40 years, relative peace and security. And for that matter, there is no urgency for better military spending. But to me, I think it is time for Indonesia to give more attention to the budget of the military. On Papua, if there is any problem in Papua, to me, is the problems of too much power in the hands of the local authorities, then too much money and lack of capacity. Too much power because since 2004 we introduced what we call spatial autonomy for Aceh and Papua, meaning more powers and authorities are delegated to local governments. And it is accompanied by a very generous revenue sharing. 70% of revenues from oil and gas and other minings would go to local governments. So instantly, this has made Papua very rich regions in terms of spending, income per capita and development spending per capita. It's the highest in Indonesia. They have elected through direct elections their governors of West Papua and western part of Papua. And with this so much power, so much money in their hands, I think what we need to, the central government do more is to help improve the capacity. Education is the key, but education takes time. So, of course, we know that there are groups in Papua has been championing the inspiration of Papua from Indonesia. But I think as the people themselves recognize now that, especially the newly elected governments, which refers the budget's spending of the local governments to, in the past, 67 to 70% of the local budgets were for local administration. Now it's for direct subsidy for the welfare of the people. That's why village program, strong village program for the local governments. We have strong interest that the spatial autonomy regime that in place in Papua to succeed, because this is the answer to the dream of some to have their own independent Papua. But again, like in Aceh, we are strongly for dialogue and negotiation. But we still suffer the impressions in some quarters that when they talk about Papua, talk about the military and the police, they have in their mind the attitude, the military, the police of the past. We are new Indonesia, and for that matter, we should be judged by not the old yardstick, but to what we have today in Indonesia. Because like in any open and democratic society, if there is any violation of human rights, I must assure you that there is no such government policy to violate human rights. Our military has changed a lot. I recall at the 2 cabinet meetings that President Yudhoyono instructed the Chief of National Police and the commander of the armed force to exercise utmost restraint in dealing with the demonstrations, to the extent that when demonstration occurred in Abepura, Papua, some years ago, 4 of our police and 1 junior military members who just simply passed by the area were bludgeoned to death. That's the fact, but no one cares that that happened. If there is only 1 case of detentions or in terms of response on demonstration, then it was blew up to the extent like we were in the past, in which we perhaps, I mean, they did this kind of response in the old days, but not now, because as an open and democratic Indonesia, we have a self-corrective mechanisms. Our parliament has been very active. Our media is very vibrant, perhaps labeled as the most fierce in Asia. And our civil society are very active. No way that any single violation of human rights could be put aside. That's the beauty of democracy and democratic process.
Mr. Minister, thank you very much. The Minister has a very tight schedule to keep, so we'll run out of time. I want to thank you for all you've had to say. On behalf of the Carnegie Endowment, the U.S.-Indonesia Society, and the many friends of Indonesia who are here today, thank you for a very substantial and serious presentation.